So, Luc, how many spam calls have you gotten this week?
Yes, so I did check that, and actually this week I did not get any spam calls, which is rare. But last week I did get a few, and then I got some which says like possible spam, which is interesting. Right?
I only got one this week, which is a pretty good week, and I got a possible spam too, so I'm pretty happy about that. English and French too, just to boot. So that's perfect. So this is what we'll be talking about today. Why are spam calls still an issue? My name is Maximilien, and I'm the CEO of TelcoBridges. Joining me once again is Luc Morissette, our VP of Client Technical Services. We'll be talking about a little bit about the history of phone numbers, their role in voice networks, their role in trying to prevent fraudulent calls, in addition to solutions and tools available to service providers today to make their networks more secure. So, Luc, in your experience, was there less fraud before?
Yeah, traditionally there was less fraud. I think it was just more complicated to do the fraud. These numbers that exist in a network are assigned to each individual, and also to per carrier. They have their set of numbers. They assign to their subscribers the numbers. So if someone makes a fraudulent call from his number, well, sooner or later they'll know that it comes from this person, right? That would seem to be easy at the time.
And there's this element too of when phone numbers had to belong to like a building, then or multiple numbers in a building, then fraud is kind of there's different calculus around fraud. Fraud is more difficult to do, right, through the phone number.
Yeah, sure. So you're in a building and you have a shared numbers. Someone picks up a phone. Well, he still need to pick up the phone and do something, right? It was very manual, I think, at the time. Now there's some automated systems that can do these things, right?
Right. And then, of course, there was the advent of mobile, as we've talked about on this show before. Today, there's even no physical dimension to the SIM card, so there's very little friction to getting a SIM card, and then everybody has a mobile phone, and so the access to a number is not particularly difficult.
The subscriber is not you; it's the SIM card, right? So if someone has a SIM card, that's who he is, right? So it could be that, but I still think it adds to the problem, but it's not the source of the problem, right? Source of the problem is really places where they use numbers which are either not theirs, not allocated, or using them fraudulously. That's where it becomes a problem, and it's like an automated system, either with totally automated system or with call centers of person doing calls using those numbers.
Yeah, that's a good point. And actually, you said something before, and maybe we can level set for the audience with that. The way numbering works is that a service provider owns like a bank of numbers, and then when they get a new subscriber, they can then allocate a phone number to that person.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
Got it. But then there's this concept of number portability as well, which allows, because the number becomes kind of part of your identity, right? Like I know in my family, like we all had the last same 4 digits to like our cell phones. So like your number is a little bit of, you want to keep your number if you move.
Yeah, but it's still owned by one subscriber, one service provider, and then given to another service provider, saying that if we see this number, it's not this guy anymore, it's this company anymore, it's this company. That's how you know how to route the call to that person.
Got it. So there's still a concept of like service providers are the owners of
absolutely
the numbers altogether. Got
it. There's one other thing is that they are allocated as a set of numbers, but maybe not all of them are being used right now. Because if they have another subscriber, they just pick in the pool of numbers they have and give it to them. But these are not used yet.
Yeah. There's like allocated of the inventory of numbers. There's allocated and then like unallocated.
Well, not only unallocated, I mean allocated to a service provider, but not in use.
Not in use. Got it. That's a good distinction. And then the other thing that I think we have to talk about, but is kind of over the top, I'll call it point to point, like IP address to IP address, basically, FaceTime audio calls or like WhatsApp calls, which are convenient when you have the application, when you know who you're trying to speak to. But then the gap there is then businesses, right? So if I'm trying to call Air Canada or they're trying to call me, it becomes difficult to do
it's
WhatsApp.
that's the exact thing. It's businesses, right? If you know the call is coming from your mother and on FaceTime and you see it's not your mother, it doesn't work, right? It's not gonna work on a one-to-one, point-to-point system.
Got it. Because I guess that's the way the system was designed with phone numbers for that reason is like, if I want to be able to call the restaurant next door, I need some way to like contact them. And then the phone number concept allows me to do that with the phone number having been assigned to that restaurant or business.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So Luc, before going on any further, let's just make sure that the audience and ourselves are squared away on the acronyms. And there's a ton of acronyms get thrown around in our space. Mm-hmm. So DID, what does DID stand for?
DID is direct inward dialing. It's just a number. DID is a number assigned to a subscriber. Right? So it's a specific way to reach someone.
So like phone number in use.
In use, well, it can be in use or not because they have a pool of DIDs, right? Each of the services. Okay. They can be in use or not.
Okay. KYC.
You said know your customer. Right?
Know your customer. So that's right.
Know the other person. That
Opening a bank account. Anybody who's had to like do some financial stuff because of anti-money laundering regulation, KYC is very, very important. What about NANPA?
The North American Numbering Plan.
Numbering Plan Administrator.
Okay, it's just this is the pool of numbers that are assigned to the service providers for being used.
Yeah. So the organization that manages all of the phone numbers. Okay, perfect.
So these organizations, they know which numbers have been assigned and which have not been assigned. Yeah.
Okay, and then let's level set. Like, what are the fraud prevention elements that exist in today's network? Like, what's one that comes to mind for you?
Well, the one we've talked about is StoreShaken, of course. But it's pretty advanced, right? There's probably some more basic things that could be done. Like, for example, I'm just thinking of a service provider that receives a call in his network and he doesn't recognize the number. Either the caller number or the calling number. It's like, it seems weird, right? So there could be some work being done there, which is pretty basic.
Yeah.
But StoreShaken is one level further where you can dig in a global information database which has already tagged spam calls, right? So spam numbers actually.
Yeah. Well, the premise of StoreShaken is that the originating service provider validates their level of trust, and then that attestation of the level of trust can travel with the call, so that anybody who then receives the call is like, oh, okay, whoever started this call has a high degree of confidence that it's not fraud. Therefore, I can connect it. That's one. In fact, I think the basis of what we were talking about on our cell phones in terms of things being tagged as possible spam, I'm not exactly sure how they're implementing it in this case, but that's the same basis, the same concepts there. There's also, I think there's just blacklists, right? Like people use blacklists.
Absolutely. Blacklists is something that you can use. They have some companies have their own mechanism to see calls, and then they can see that some calls are too long, doesn't make sense. They're made to some countries, and they can just say, okay, well, this is a blacklist. They create a blacklist. Next call that comes in with this number, they just stop it.
Right.
So that's a very basic function.
The difficulty, though, it seems with blacklists is that it's a lot of effort to maintain, right?
Absolutely, because each number has to be investigated somewhat, and then when do you remove that number from the blacklist, right? So it's and you don't want to block a call that is a valid one. So
there's this concept of false positives.
Yep.
And then I know like the FCC also has these robocaller rules, right? Which is basically just the service provider is responsible for making sure that there's no spammy actors originating in their network. And then you get into like trying to identify like pattern usage and like how many calls they're starting and what numbers they're using. So it gets pretty messy. That too is hard to get right.
It's very hard. It's very hard to get something right. Each one are doing their own mechanisms and can be or not efficient.
So we talked a little bit about the measures in place. Obviously, the industry isn't perfect and there's still a ton of work to do because, we just talked about it. We still get spam calls, and I'm sure our listeners get spam calls too. How does spam work today? Like, what are they doing to still be able to place spammy outbound calls?
They spoof the numbers, right? They just take numbers that exist or not, and they just make calls using those numbers. If that network we just talked about is not serious enough and just lets them pass, it's going to go through the network, and then other elements in the network all the way to the end, they say, well, this looks like a normal call, so you just get this call all the way to you, right? But they're using a source number that is not right.
Yeah. So when you say spoof, just to make sure that we explain it for the audience, that means like what? What does that mean in your mind?
Well, they use, when you make a call, your source number is in the call. So the receiver can see it's coming from Luke, right?
Yeah.
Now they use another number, right? So you see this number coming into your phone, but it doesn't tell you anything, this number, right? You see it's not coming from your mother because it's not tagged in your contact list, right? It's another number. So yeah, it looks okay.
But it looks legit.
It looks legit, exactly.
Yeah.
So if it's you, maybe you say, well, I'm busy, I'm not gonna answer this one because I have a feeling it could be a fraud call.
Yeah.
But a business, they have no choice. They have to answer this call, right? They have to answer this call, and then maybe they get caught in fraudulent attempts.
Yeah. I mean, you're bringing up a good point, which is actually at the heart of the issue, which is the service providers and the people in the network actually know very little about the call when the call starts, right? Like, the number, the level of attestation now with Stir Shaken, which is a good step forward, but you don't know like what the call is about or what the intention is. And so you're basically, a lot of what we talked about just now is trying to find a way to discern whether it's like there's a high degree of likelihood that it's fraud.
Well, the service provider can verify if they're using a number from their pool list.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty easy, right? So you get this, but somewhere else in the network it could be changed, or it's another strange service provider, or it comes from another country, gets in, and there's no way to verify the origin of the numbers, of some things like that, right?
But we were just talking about offline that like spoofing is kind of like stealing a number, right? Like I understood it as like a spam actor will find a way to use a number that is not assigned to them.
Yep.
And then it's that number that again looks legit because it's in the inventory database and what have you, and then it gets passed along, but then lo and behold, it's a bad actor behind it.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, there's this other dimension to fraud that was brought up internally kind of last week is, I mean, there's nothing preventing a bad actor from just buying a SIM card, right?
Sure. Yep. Anybody can buy a SIM card.
Like if they're willing to take the cost, they can just buy a SIM card and perform bad actor things.
Exactly. But my feeling, as personal feeling, is that it's a bit complicated to do, right? You need to buy probably multiple SIM cards to make it work. And then you have to pay for these SIM cards, so then you need to make enough money fraudulously so that you pay for these costs. And then you bought it somewhere, so there's maybe a way to trace you back. And this guy bought 10 SIM cards or 100 SIM cards, and it seems weird. And then maybe they can investigate and find the source. So it's like, maybe there's other ways much easier to do this.
Yeah, fair enough. It does sound kind of operationally complex. But I think this is where this concept of KYC for numbers comes up. It's like, in theory, if you knew exactly who it was, similar to a bank account or a mortgage, then it's very difficult for them to use it to do bad actor things.
Yeah, but I'm sure some are doing it. It's just, it may not be as widespread as other ways to spoof numbers.
Got it.
You don't have to pay for anything.
Okay, so then let's move on to tools and solutions for service providers. So there's obviously Stir Shaken, which we've talked about in prior episodes. It's a big step forward for the industry. There's also this concept of DNO lists. Can you explain a little bit what DNO is?
Yeah. So DNO is, they call it do not originate, and it's lists of numbers that are not allocated. So list of numbers that will never originate a call. And actually some toll-free numbers also don't allow making calls. You can only receive calls, right? So it's a big master list of numbers which you can verify if it's in that list or not.
Yeah, that's interesting. For me, I think about it as like a improved blacklist. So a blacklist is like backward looking. So it's like, okay, you committed fraud, therefore this number is on the blacklist. This is more like preventative blacklist, where it's like, okay, well, we know that these thousands of toll-free numbers are only meant to receive, never call out. So we'll put those in the list, because if ever spoofing happens and this number is the number that gets matched with whatever random digit mechanism they have, then you know that you can turn it off.
Yeah, but I would like call it a whitelist, right?
Whitelist.
Whitelist means that all these numbers are available. I've been attributed to make calls, so they could make calls. There's another list of numbers that exist in the network but cannot make a call. Okay, so it's like a whitelist of numbers that can make calls in the system, and you can query that and do the reverse, which becomes a blacklist at that moment.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And I mean, what we talked about earlier is like a blacklist. There's difficulties with it, right? Whereby like it gets stale, and it like requires like basically like full-time management of the database for it to be somewhat useful. And that's what we're seeing is in the industry is there are like vendors that basically like have and support and maintain and update these types of databases to facilitate that for service providers.
Yeah, that's right. It's millions of numbers that the DNO help you to resolve right away without having to add the blacklist, right? So,
and the FCC, I believe, is moving in this direction. So the FCC is asking all service providers to check outbound calls from their networks against a reasonable DNO database, I believe by December 15th of this year. Is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, and that if that is implemented everywhere, even if you'd make 2 or 3 dips on the same number, it doesn't matter, right? The important is that at least one person in the whole path makes one and verifies that this number is valid to make a call. At least it prevents a lot of fraudulent calls.
And the big benefit of a database like this is for the spoofing use case you described, right? Because I mean, if someone just buys a SIM card from a store, it's not clear to me that SIM card phone number will be in a DNO database. In fact, it probably won't. But if the spoofing algorithm for the digits ends up matching something on the list, then all of a sudden having the DNO database prevents that call from reaching its destination.
And that's the thing, right? If you spoof a number which doesn't exist, DNO will catch it and you'll be able to drop the call immediately. If it's in the list, then you need to have other mechanism to identify that this number, after X amount of calls, which seems invalid, then it would be put in another spam list for them.
Got it. And so can you tell the audience a little bit about our partnership with Somos?
Sure. So we can now on our systems send requests to this DNO database, which doesn't include only valid numbers. It also includes all these toll-free numbers that are there. And then when we query this, we get the result. Is it a valid fraudulent call? Is it okay call? And then we can know at this moment. We have the choice to drop the call or let it go, and then we could add, like we saw, possible spam or something like that. So we can let our customer choose if they're okay to drop the call, or if they're okay to let the call pass with a possible spam information. And we can log all this information in our call detail record. So then you can see how many calls were blocked because of this intervention. Right?
Yep. No, thanks for that. That's helpful. Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons we decided to partner with Somos for this use case, I mean, obviously with the FCC's deadline coming up, we wanted to make sure that service providers that we work with had a way to solve that issue. But also they have a very robust database in terms of their real number service, I think it's something like 6 billion entries. And so they pull from a variety of sources. It's well maintained. And so it's the best way to kind of help service providers meet that need. And just to be clear, we can do this from the SBC or the media gateway. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Any device that we have can have, and then what we do is we add a little API module that can send a request to the Somos database, and we have access to all their numbers right away.
What about this concept of like analytics and AI based on number activity? It's, I wouldn't say it's widely implemented, because maybe I'll take a step back. This concept of having this list and just checking the number against the list it's a brute force approach, right? It's like a straightforward, don't have to think too hard. Just like, if there's a match, turn it off. I'm done.
Correct. Very basic, very simple. You drop the call. That's it. Right.
Effective if you get the list right.
Of course, you have to get the list right.
Yeah. Effective if you get the list right.
Yes.
But then, like in theory, because we talked about like the difficulty with this fraud stuff is we don't have a lot of information about the content of the call or the intention of the caller when a call starts as the network side, right? But in theory, there's this like plethora of data with regards to how many calls are originating from this one number simultaneously. Does that suggest some sort of automation, which suggests kind of, high volume and potentially bad actor intent? Location too, like if a number has never called that location before, or is calling a variety of locations at the same time. Like in theory, I mean, like, does that sound right? Like that in theory, we'd be able to apply analytics to this problem and kind of get to a solution?
Yes. And I think that the fraudulent calls are making money out of companies or persons or something. Okay, if we think about the companies that the service providers are passing these calls and not making money out of those calls because they're fraudulent, right? You can accept so much of these fraudulent calls without affecting too much your business. But if you get too many, that's when it becomes a big problem. So first, you drop the easy calls to drop. Next is you can add another layer, start shaking, verify your numbers, stuff like that. And then you can add another layer to really analyze the patterns of the calls. It's just more difficult to implement and get it right. Yeah. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's definitely possible. And I know some of the service providers are doing it, and they're pretty successful in doing that. But you don't want to get a false positive, right? Yeah. That's very difficult to get it right.
I would imagine it's the type of thing that's difficult to get right at scale too. So like one silly example that comes to mind is if I'm a small service provider and I have, let's say, 2 call centers, and they do outbound, so they call for like surveys during an election cycle or something. If there's 2, then I know who they are. That's one thing. But if I have like 10,000, then that's like a whole other thing, and the patterns become crazy.
Yeah, it's possible to do. It's just a lot more work than a lot of other ways to do it. Right.
So Luc, what's your kind of key takeaway from today's discussion?
I'm very down to earth, right? So very simple. If the number is not allocated to anyone, why do we let it go through the network? I just drop this. Very simple. That's the first thing you should do.
Okay, fair enough. I think for me is the importance of numbers in this fraud question, I think, is something that's not talked about enough. I think this concept of fraud prevention comes up a lot, but it's really thinking about like, what does it mean to allocate numbers? Like, what can we do with phone numbers? And that's really where service providers can play a role in hopefully continuing to solve this problem. So thank you everybody for joining us on today's episode. If you want to continue to learn a little bit about the industry and follow TelcoBridges, please make sure to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and leave comments below if you have any questions.